pleasure to meet you. GS Youngblood's with me today, and so it's kind of funny because when you jumped on in the pre-conversation before I hit record, it's almost like we already met each other, but it's only been over email. So GS, thanks for hanging with us a little bit today.
Yeah, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Right. So I came across you and your book, The Masculine in Relationship, which highly recommend. It was a great listen. I listened to it while I was driving back and forth to visit family in Kansas. So it was an easy one trip. I got the whole thing done. Only thing I missed, I'm upset about that, is I wasn't there to actually write stuff down because I was driving my RV at the time. And that's just not safe to try to multitask when you're driving a big vehicle like that.
And really not.
Yes, no, it's not, particularly for everybody else on the road. And
Yeah.
but I'm curious because the way you frame the idea of masculinity and the polarity of masculine, feminine, and then the blueprint. I want to just start with you, GS, on the idea of you came across this thing and you've kind of crystallized it into a blueprint. Walk me through that.
Well, let me talk about the process of why a blueprint, and then I can address what is the blueprint. Does that sound all right?
Perfect.
Yeah. So, when I came out of my marriage 14 years ago, I was pretty lost, and I was not in my own power. I'd definitely become a nice guy. I had allowed myself to become emasculated, and I wasn't in my own power. And the pain of that ending was motivation for me to find a better way. And, I embarked on my own journey. I got introduced to David Data over 15 years ago, and that kind of kicked it off for me, even thinking about these masculine, feminine dynamics and how they related to my lifestyle. And I've studied those dynamics ever since. But here's the thing, is a lot of the sources that were out there for me to learn from, they weren't very applied. And, for me, I need things to be really simple, and I need a simple, clear structure for them to really sink into my nervous system and get installed in my operating system, so to speak.
Right.
And so that's what I wanted to give to other men, was a very simple, I don't want to say system, but I'll call it a framework that they could use. If they could embody these specific qualities, then the sum total of that would be a man who was grounded in his own masculine power and still relational with his partner. And so there were a few aspirations. One is make it simple for men. Number two, keep it relational. So I didn't want it to go down the road of just like the red pill community or some of the alpha stuff that's out there that isn't actually very relational, because this is for guys in relationship. And that's a kind of a unique combination. That was the second aspiration. And then the third aspiration was it worked in the modern world. Like, we're not rolling the clock back to the 1950s. We're in a
absolutely not. Yep.
Yeah. So how could there be a model of masculinity that wasn't watered down but still worked in our modern world? And that's what I offer, and that's what I brought to the world. And this is a framework that any man can embody. You don't have to be tall or more muscular or smarter or more wealthy or any of those things. You don't have to be more of any of those things. Any man can embody the qualities of the masculine blueprint and inhabit more of his masculine energy. So that was the goal and the genesis of the framework itself. Now, what is the framework? The blueprint is comprised of three elements. And the first one is respond versus react. So this is the quality of a man he's very grounded. His nervous system is settled. He's not reactive to all the stimuli in the world and just kind of living out of his reactivity. He's grounded. There's a certain stillness to him, which is different than stoicism. I don't want those two to get confused. Stillness and stoicism are different. Stillness is a way that you receive the world and give yourself the space to choose how you want to and then engage with the world. Whereas, unfortunately, some of the modern perceptions of stoicism and the way a lot of guys learn it is like, I got to be totally shut down, no emotional expression. And often that ends up being quite turned inward, which is really painful for our feminine partners because they need us to engage and be relational, which is just the opposite of that. So we teach stillness and groundedness and spaciousness and presence. I mean, these are all these component qualities that all add up to a man that feels very grounded. And guys like this, they walk into a room and you can just feel, they're very choiceful moment to moment, rather than that guy.
We use the terminology of solidness, right? Of a
Solid.
solid,
Yeah.
flexible self. That it's a guy that knows who he is, knows who he's not, and is more comfortable and confident as he is.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, he feels very present in this moment, not sort of replaying past traumas he's had or past bad experiences
Right.
or nervousness he has about how something will unfold. So that's element one of the blueprint. So it's called respond versus react. Now, element two is really targeted at a lot of the nice guys in the world because it's called provide structure. And what this is it's the quality of a man that has a lot of inner clarity about what the moment needs. And
Hmm.
that encompasses him having inner clarity about what he wants, what he needs, what his wisdom tells him is appropriate for the moment. But it also includes other, because there's an element of attunement here. So it's not just about what you want, but you're also attuned to your partner, and you know what she likes, what she doesn't like, what her needs, her boundaries, her preferences are, and you're folding that in as well. And so you have this inner clarity, which then gets expressed as outer direction in the world,
Right.
and that's either the what comes next or how we're going to do things. Even if you're not predetermining the what, you're maybe structuring the how, so everybody can operate within a structure. And that is a very masculine quality, that kind of direction,
Hmm.
structure, and clarity. And that's your gift to the world.
Hmm.
Oftentimes your feminine partner will want to just surrender into your lead. That's not all the time, but there are
Right.
times that she often will want to do that. And so that's what element two is all about, is provide structure.
And you have a
Yeah.
phrase that I think is so good with this idea that I've taken now and started using with some of the masterminds I do and just interaction with people is
Hmm.
because this is the way I hear this, GS, is this is a bringing forward more into the
Meaningful.
modern uh,
Yeah.
concept of this, where the phrase you used in the book that just stood out to me so much was, you don't have to make every decision, but you make sure a decision gets made.
Yeah,
And
exactly.
that's huge. On like, I just help kind of create a framework. I don't have to be the one that decides everything. I just help make sure there's a forward process or plan
Yeah.
in place that
Yeah.
also, as you're describing, is in tune and flexible with what circumstances are, with what the people are around me are, and what is best in the as we all determine.
Oh,
So
you
keep
there?
going. Yeah, I think I lost you for a second, but that's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. It glitched, yeah. Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And the thing that I talk about, it's about embodying a directional energy. It's that quality of forward movement that you talked about. And it doesn't mean that it's specified how that happens, but it's like you're always looking to move the ball forward, to provide a frame for what's happening, and to structure things more. So that's a directional energy that men can start to inhabit, that leads to you living your life where you're providing structure.
Hmm.
Okay, so that leads us to the third element of the blueprint, which is create safety. And we're talking about physical, financial, and emotional safety. In the book, I don't talk a lot about physical and financial. Maybe I'll save that for a sequel. But I do talk a lot about emotional safety. And
Hmm.
I'm telling you, there's not a bigger determinant of how open your feminine partner is to you, both at the heart level and often how much she chooses to share her physicality with you and physical intimacy, not a bigger determinant than the level of trust and safety that she feels relative
Right.
to you. And so you're always wanting to create more trust and a more sense of safety. Trust is, it's both obvious and also subtle. Following through on what you said you were going to do, I think, is an obvious one that most men
Right.
understand they should do. What I think most men don't understand is when there's little breaches of that trust, not even about integrity, but just not following through on what you said you would do. I don't think men realize how much that affects the feminine nervous system, and it's not like if she forgets to pick up the milk that you asked her. It's very different. It doesn't impact your nervous system. You're just like, okay, well, great, now we don't have milk. But for her, it's much deeper and goes to her sense of trust and safety. Emotional safety also includes um, holding space for her sometimes messy expression of her own emotions. I mean, here's the truth: is that the feminine nervous system feels things way more than we do, and so we guys,
Right.
we have no idea what it's like to inhabit a feminine nervous system. They feel these things way more than we do, so of course they come out a little messy at times. And of course, they can be very challenging for us because we have a much more informational and logical lens on the world. So, your ability to hold space for that rather than trying to convince her not to feel the way she feels. And we do that by getting
Right.
defensive. We do by that by shutting down and just like shutting her out. We do that by trying to convince her that she has her facts wrong or it's not a big deal. Like we guys do a lot of that. But what we need to be doing instead of telling her not to feel that way is we need to just recognize this is in fact how she feels in the moment. That's the one
Hmm.
pure truth that we can state
Hmm.
here. She does feel this in the moment.
Yeah, it's
And
real,
the
right?
more,
It actually is there. And what I'm hearing you say here, GS, is the way this plays out in my life. Just a quick behind the curtain of I can be prone to right fighting, which is the data driven. No, no, no. That
yeah,
is not what was said. What was said was, because it's kind of,
yeah,
for whatever reason, that's the holy grail that'll solve all of this if we just got the facts
yeah,
right rather than, no, not even close.
yeah. Yeah, I want guys to let go of that need to get the facts right in the moment. Because as you said, in this moment, it's real for her. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter whether it's real for you or not. It's real for her. So trying to tell her not to feel that way is it's kind of like screaming at your child to stop crying, a young child that maybe skinned their knee or they're upset or overstimulated.
Right.
And it just doesn't work to say stop crying. So we want to make space for that. And there's ways to achieve this is kind of the work that I do with men a lot. There's ways that I teach, and probably you do too with your clients. How do you achieve emotional resonance with her and then co regulate her nervous system down? That's really what you want to do first. Job number one is regulate both your nervous systems before you try to tackle the actual content of what's being talked about. And
Hmm.
if people's nervous systems are jacked, you're just not going to get anywhere until you regulate those both nervous systems and bring them down. So that's very, very important. You've got to attend to the nervous system first when she's feeling that emotion. And then once you do that, once you kind of everything's settled down, which eventually will happen, then it's okay to address the informational and factual aspects of this, but not before
Right.
that. So
Right.
we have a bit of a sequencing problem, and I have a quote from the book: "Feelings first, facts later," and it's one of my favorite because it makes everything easier when we heed that advice.
Hmm. Yeah, because that's the old adage of in a relationship, if one person has an issue, the relationship has an issue,
Yeah,
right? Like we've got a
yeah,
problem, even if I don't see it as such, it is a problem still. Or in the reverse can
yeah.
be true. I can have a problem, she doesn't see it as such. It's still a problem that the relationship is
Right.
facing. And so I
Yeah.
love the idea of attunement and the idea of co-regulating, and because that's kind of it's not done in vacuums or isolated, it's done in connection, and that's the power of it,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And so it's about when our partner expresses pain. Instead of defending and getting it right and trying not to be the bad guy, because often her pain, somehow implies to us that we did something wrong and we're bad. But if instead we can tolerate that feeling of maybe temporarily being the bad guy or feeling like I might be the bad guy, if I can tolerate that feeling and then just be open to what's going on over there with my partner, this is where
Hmm.
curiosity really pays off. Like, oh wow, you're really upset about this. Okay, tell me more. I want to understand, babe.
Hmm.
And that in itself is a huge leap forward from what we guys are normally doing of the but wait a minute.
Yeah, you don't have all the details. Let me explain it to you, and that'll make it all
Yeah,
fine,
yeah.
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, so that's the
that
blueprint right there. That's the
I
third
love it
element of
because
the blueprint.
the thing that rings true to me about this, GS, is the same kind of idea. It sounds like was the impetus for you to put it in this format, because I've gone through the David Dita stuff, the Glover stuff, the red pill, blue pill. I mean, I've scoured for all the years too and it's a great
Hmm.
theory. But as my wife is prone to say, okay, theory only gets me so far. you gotta, you gotta give
Yeah.
me a structure, a tangible path, something to I can actually get a little teeth on this
Yeah.
and start applying it. And that's where this still, again, it's not the power in it to me is it's not a 1 2 3. It's just a more succinct framework that now I can start looking at how is this actually playing out in my life
Mm-hmm.
in real time and day-to-day interactions, because then you build into the world of the polarity, right? That there's a need for that polarity. It's so vital for sure in marriage, but I think in every relationship, it's a
Yeah,
vital
you're
aspect
absolutely
of an
right.
energy
It's so
source.
necessary. It's so necessary. And what you said about theory is also exactly on point. Theory leaves you the minute, she's standing in front of you with fire in her eyes, and doesn't do you a whole lot of good at that point. And so we've got to go deeper, have something more actionable that isn't going to leave you when you need it the most.
Right. And so I want to walk through a little bit of the idea of like, because you kind of put steps to the different points of it, right? Of creating safety is not just making sure she's physically safe. I mean, there's
Hmm.
nuance in all of it. There's
Hmm.
elements of the structure, there's nuance, but I think the real power is the respond versus react. And
Hmm.
because that's such a instinctual, to me, the real power of all of this is the idea of the respond versus react, because
Yeah.
responding is meaning I'm heading towards the discomfort in the way I interpret it. The react means I
Hmm.
let the discomfort dictate what happens.
Yeah. I
And
like
I
that.
just want to get
Yeah.
rid of discomfort as quick as possible.
Yep.
I want to dive deeper into how do we actually do that better, because this kind of thing fits into the stillness,
Yeah.
the ability to have multiple things going on and then decide. I mean, so how do you walk through that on a deep